La mugera Apache que salve mi ofreció a su hija como esposo. The sun was already high when the man entered the desert, turning the sand into a wide ocean of fire and silence. He traveled alone, with only a small bag, a water bottle, and a tired horse that had seen too many long roads. This land was not meant to be crossed easily. The air was dry, the wind carried sharp sand, and every step felt heavier than the last. Still, he moved forward, guided by need and stubborn courage. He had crossed dangerous places before, but something about this land felt different, as if it was watching him closely. By midday, the heat became cruel. The horse slowed down, breathing hard, and the man knew he had to stop soon. He searched for shade, but the desert offered very little kindness. As he looked around, something unusual caught his eye near a group of rocks. At first he thought it was only a shadow or a piece of dark cloth, but as he moved closer he realized it was a person lying on the ground. His heart beat faster. In places like this, stopping could mean danger. Many travelers avoided helping strangers, especially near tribal lands where misunderstandings could cost lives. But he could not ignore what he saw. A woman lay there, barely moving, her clothes torn by thorns, her skin burned by the sun. Her breathing was weak and her eyes were closed. She was clearly injured and had been there for a long time. He stood still for a moment, fighting with himself. Fear told him to leave. Kindness told him to stay. He thought about the long road behind him and the empty future ahead if he walked away now. Slowly, he knelt beside her and spoke softly, hoping she could hear him. There was no answer, but her chest moved slightly. She was alive. He noticed symbols on her clothing and small details that told him she belonged to the Apache people. He knew their land was nearby. Helping her could bring trouble if her tribe misunderstood his intentions, but leaving her would mean certain death. He made his choice without saying a word. Carefully, he gave her small drops of water, letting it touch her lips. He waited, patient and quiet, until she showed signs of awareness. Her eyes opened for a brief moment, filled with fear and confusion. She tried to move, but pain forced her back down. He raised his hands to show he meant no harm. His voice stayed calm, slow, and respectful. The woman watched him closely. She did not understand his words, but she understood his actions. He cleaned her wounds as gently as he could, using cloth from his own shirt. He built a small shade with his blanket and the rocks, blocking the worst of the sun. Time moved slowly as the desert watched them both. As the afternoon passed, the wind grew stronger. Sand danced across the ground and the sky changed color. The man knew night would bring cold and the woman would not survive without shelter. He decided to take her closer to the hills, where there might be protection and possibly her people. Lifting her was not easy. She was weak, and he feared hurting her more. Step by step, he led his horse while supporting her weight. Every few steps, they rested. The woman's strength faded in and out, but she never cried out. Her silence carried dignity and pain in equal measure. As the sun began to fall, distant shapes appeared on the horizon. The man froze when he saw them. Figures on horseback moved like shadows against the orange sky. He knew what that meant. The Apache were near. Fear returned to his chest, heavy and cold. He could turn back, but there was nowhere to run. The riders approached quickly. Within moments he was surrounded. The sound of hooves and firm voices filled the air. Weapons were raised, and eyes full of suspicion stared at him. He slowly lowered the woman to the ground and stepped back, raising his hands once more. The injured woman spoke then. Her voice was weak but clear. She spoke in her language, her words flowing with urgency and truth. The riders listened closely. Their expressions changed from anger to confusion, then to cautious understanding. One of them knelt beside her, checking her wounds. The man waited, his heart pounding. He did not move. He did not speak. He knew that respect and patience were his only protection now. After a long moment, the leader of the group nodded. The weapons lowered slightly, though trust had not yet arrived. They helped the woman onto a horse and gestured for the man to follow. He understood he was not free, but he was not condemned either. They traveled in silence as darkness fell. The desert became cold and the stars filled the sky. When they reached the camp, firelight revealed faces of all ages watching him. Whispers moved through the air. The man felt every eye on him as he was guided to the center. The woman was taken away for care. Before she disappeared into the tents, she looked back at him. Her eyes met his, and in that moment he saw gratitude deeper than words. He bowed his head slightly, not knowing what tomorrow would bring. That night he sat alone under the stars, guarded but unharmed. The desert wind whispered around him. He thought about the small choice he had made earlier that day. A choice to stop, a choice to care. He did not know that this single act would change his life forever. He only knew that in the middle of the harshest land he had followed his humanity, and the desert had answered in silence. Morning arrived quietly in the camp. The cold night slowly released its grip, and soft light touched the tents and the faces of the people waking for a new day. The man had not slept much. He had remained seated near the fire, watched carefully but treated without cruelty. No ropes held him, yet he knew he was not free. Every sound made him alert. Every movement around him reminded him that he was far from his own world. As the camp came to life, he noticed how organized everything was. People moved with purpose. Some prepared food, others checked animals, and a few elders sat together, speaking in low voices. No one shouted. No one showed fear. There was strength in their calm. The man watched quietly, learning without asking. Soon, two men approached him. Their faces were serious but not angry. With simple gestures, they asked him to stand and follow. He obeyed without resistance. He understood that his behavior now would shape everything that followed. One wrong move could undo the small trust he had earned. They led him to a large open space where several elders were gathered. These were men and women marked by age, wisdom, and authority. Their eyes were sharp, their expressions unreadable. The man felt small before them. He lowered his gaze slightly, showing respect. The injured woman was there too, sitting under shade. Her wounds had been cleaned and fresh cloth covered her injuries. She looked tired but alive. When she saw him, her eyes softened. She spoke to the elders, her voice stronger than the night before. Though he could not understand her words, he could hear truth in her tone. The elders listened carefully. One of them asked questions, pointing gently toward the man. The woman answered without hesitation. She explained how she had been hurt, how she had been left behind, and how this stranger had chosen to help when he could have walked away. Her words carried weight. She was not exaggerating. She was simply telling what had happened. When she finished, silence filled the space. The man felt the eyes of the elders settle on him again. One elder stood and approached him slowly. The man remained still. The elder studied his face, his hands, his clothes worn by travel. He spoke in a deep, steady voice. Though the man did not understand the language, the meaning was clear. He was being judged not as an enemy but as a man. The elder gestured toward the camp, then toward the desert beyond. He asked a question through signs. The man understood enough to answer honestly. He pointed to the road behind him, then placed his hand on his chest, showing he traveled alone and meant no harm. He spoke slowly, choosing simple words, knowing only his tone mattered. The elders exchanged looks. They were not convinced yet, but doubt had softened. Instead of punishment, they decided on observation. The man would stay in the camp for a time. Not as a prisoner, but not as a guest either. His actions would speak for him. That day he was given simple tasks. He carried water, gathered wood, and helped where he could. No one ordered him harshly. He was shown what to do, and he did it without complaint. Some watched closely, waiting for a mistake. Others watched with curiosity. Children stared at him openly, whispering and giggling when he smiled at them. As hours passed, tension slowly eased. The man did not try to explain himself too much. He did not demand comfort or protection. He worked quietly, respecting their space. When food was offered, he accepted with gratitude and ate slowly, showing appreciation. These small actions did not go unnoticed. In the afternoon, he was allowed to sit near the injured woman. She thanked him in her own way, placing her hand over her heart. He nodded, unsure what to say. He felt relief seeing her alive and cared for. That alone made everything worth it. Days passed like this. Each morning he helped. Each night he rested under watch but without fear. He learned small things about the tribe through observation. He saw how they valued cooperation, how elders guided without force, how respect moved quietly between generations. He realized this was not a wild or careless people, but a community built on balance and honor. The elders continued to watch him. They noticed he never touched anything without permission. He never stared disrespectfully. He never spoke when elders were speaking. When mistakes happened, he corrected them without argument. Slowly, his presence stopped feeling like a threat. One evening, a sudden storm hit the camp. Strong winds and dust filled the air. A few tents loosened and animals became restless. Without being asked, the man rushed to help secure the tents and calm the animals. He worked through the storm until everything was safe. His hands were raw, his body exhausted, but he did not stop. That night something changed. The elders gathered again. This time their expressions were different. The leader spoke to him through simple gestures and a few shared words learned over days. The message was clear. He had shown good character. He had shown patience, courage, and respect. He was no longer just being watched. He was being accepted. The woman he had saved spoke again. She reminded them that life was sacred and that kindness created bonds stronger than fear. She said that when someone saves a life without asking for reward, that debt must be honored. Her words were met with quiet agreement. From that moment, the man was treated differently. He was invited to sit closer to the elders. Food was shared more openly. Guards still remained, but their presence felt lighter, more symbolic than threatening. The man felt something unfamiliar in his chest. It was not pride, but belonging. He had not planned for this. He had only followed his conscience. Yet here he was, standing between two worlds, slowly being woven into one he never expected to touch. As the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in deep colors, the man realized something important. Trust was not given quickly, but once earned, it was powerful. He did not know what the future held, but he knew this. His actions had built a bridge where none existed before. And that bridge was only the beginning. Time moved differently after that. The man was no longer treated as a stranger who might disappear at any moment. Still, he was careful. He understood that acceptance did not mean complete trust yet. It meant opportunity. And opportunity could be lost as easily as it was gained. Each day, he continued to help wherever he was needed. He repaired simple tools, carried supplies, and assisted the elders when they traveled short distances. He never tried to act important. He never asked questions that crossed boundaries. Instead, he listened, watched, and learned. Slowly, faces that once looked at him with doubt now greeted him with quiet nods. The woman he had saved recovered steadily. Her strength returned little by little, and with it, her presence in the camp grew stronger. People respected her deeply. When she spoke, others listened. The man began to understand that she was not just any woman. She carried wisdom, history, and influence. Her survival was not a small thing for the tribe. One evening, as the fire burned low and the stars appeared, she invited him to sit nearby. She spoke slowly, mixing gestures and simple words so he could understand. She thanked him again, but this time her gratitude felt heavier, deeper. She explained that in their way of life, saving someone was not seen as a single act. It created a bond, a responsibility, a connection that could not be ignored. The man listened carefully. He did not interrupt. He felt honored but also uneasy. He had helped because it felt right, not because he wanted anything in return. He tried to explain this, placing his hand on his chest, shaking his head gently. She smiled, understanding his heart, but also knowing her people's traditions were strong. Soon after, the elders began meeting more often. Their discussions were long and serious. The man noticed how often the rescued woman was present. He also noticed how often eyes turned toward him when decisions were being discussed. Though no one said anything directly, he felt the weight of something building around him. One morning, the leader of the elders asked him to walk with them beyond the camp. They moved slowly, stopping often, speaking among themselves. Finally, they reached a quiet place overlooking the land. The leader spoke, choosing words carefully. Through simple language and gestures, he explained that a life had been saved. That such an act created a debt that could not be repaid with simple gifts. The man felt tension rise in his chest. He sensed the seriousness of the moment. He nodded, showing respect, but remained silent. The elder continued. He explained that among their people, the strongest bond was family. To welcome someone into family was the highest form of trust. The man did not fully understand yet, but he felt the meaning approaching like a distant storm. That evening, the rescued woman spoke to him again. This time, her voice was calm but firm. She told him that her gratitude went beyond words. She spoke of honor, of tradition, of joining lives to seal bonds forever. Then, gently, she shared what the elders were considering. She spoke of her daughter. The man was stunned. His thoughts tangled. He had not expected this. He respected their culture, but his world felt suddenly very far away. He thought of his past, his unfinished journey, and the life he had known. He also thought of the faces around him, the kindness he had been shown, and the deep respect in their eyes. He did not answer immediately. He did not reject the idea, but he did not accept it either. He asked for time, placing his hand over his heart and lowering his head. The woman nodded. She respected his need to think. This was not a demand. It was an offer rooted in gratitude and trust. That night, the man could not sleep. He stared at the stars, thinking about how one choice had led him here. He had helped a stranger in the desert. Now, that kindness had grown into something that could change his life forever. He realized that real honor was not about reward. It was about understanding the meaning behind the offer. Whatever he chose, it would shape not only his future, but the bond between two worlds that had met through a single act of compassion. And the decision still waited. The next days felt heavier than all the days before. The man moved through the camp as usual, helping, listening, and showing respect, but inside his thoughts never rested. The offer stayed with him like a quiet shadow. No one rushed him. No one asked him directly for an answer. That silence itself showed respect, but it also made the decision feel even more serious. He began to notice things he had not paid attention to before. He watched families sit together in the evenings, sharing food and stories. He saw how children learned by watching elders, how younger people listened without arguing, how problems were discussed calmly instead of with anger. This was a life built on connection. Every person mattered because every person belonged. One afternoon, he was asked to help repair a shelter on the edge of the camp. As he worked, an older man joined him. They did not speak much, but after a while, the elder gestured toward the camp and then toward the distant land beyond the hills. With simple words and signs, he explained that choosing a path always meant leaving another behind. No path was easy. What mattered was walking it with honesty. Those words stayed with the man long after the work was done. Later that day, he finally met the daughter of the woman he had saved. Until then, he had only seen her from a distance. She approached him calmly, with no fear and no expectation in her eyes. She greeted him with respect, the same way she greeted everyone else. There was no pressure in her presence, no demand. She was simply part of the life around her. That surprised him the most. He had expected awkwardness, maybe curiosity or judgment. Instead, she treated him as a human being, not a decision. That made him think deeply. This offer was not about control or ownership. It was about trust and connection. As days passed, he spent time reflecting alone. He thought about his old life, the road he had been traveling, and the reasons he had been moving forward without a clear destination. He realized that he had been running more than traveling, avoiding routes because routes required responsibility. Here, responsibility was not feared. It was honored. One evening, the elders called him to sit with them again. The fire burned gently and the night air was calm. The leader spoke slowly, making sure the man understood. He explained that the offer was not a command. If the man chose to decline, he would still be respected. The life he had saved would never be forgotten. Honor did not disappear because of a different choice. Hearing this lifted a weight from his chest. It allowed him to think clearly without fear. The man spoke then. He thanked them for their trust, for their kindness, and for seeing his actions rather than judging his origins. He explained that he needed to be honest, both with them and with himself. He spoke about his past, his uncertainty, and his respect for their way of life. His words were simple, but they were real. The elders listened without interruption. When he finished, there was no immediate response. Silence followed, not uncomfortable but thoughtful. Finally, the rescued woman spoke. She said that honesty was the strongest foundation of any bond. Whatever choice he made, it would be accepted if it came from truth. That night the man walked beyond the camp, standing under the wide sky. He looked at the stars, the same stars he had seen on countless nights alone. This time they felt different. He was no longer just passing through life. Life was asking him to stand still and choose. He understood something important then. Courage was not only about saving someone in danger. Sometimes courage was about staying. As dawn approached, his decision became clear, not rushed, not forced, but steady. He returned to the camp with calm in his steps. The next morning he spoke to the elders and the woman whose life he had saved. He shared his choice with respect and humility, knowing that whatever came next would shape his future in ways he could never fully predict. And the camp listened, ready to honor that choice. The morning felt different from any other morning the man had known. The air was calm, and the camp moved gently, as if everyone sensed that something important had already been decided. He felt steady inside, not because he knew everything about the future, but because he had chosen honesty over fear. The elders gathered again, and this time the mood was warm rather than questioning. The man spoke clearly and simply. He explained that he accepted the bond being offered, not as a reward but as a responsibility. He said he understood that this choice meant more than joining two people. It meant joining lives, families, and ways of living. He promised respect, patience, and effort, knowing that learning would never truly end. The elders listened carefully. When he finished, the leader nodded slowly. There were no loud reactions, no sudden movements. Acceptance came quietly, carried in calm faces and gentle gestures. The woman whose life he had saved closed her eyes for a moment, as if offering thanks to something greater than words. When she opened them again, there were tears, not of sorrow but of deep relief. The days that followed were filled with preparation, but nothing felt rushed. Everything was done with care and meaning. The man was guided through customs and expectations. He was taught not through strict rules but through example. People showed him how things were done, and he followed with attention and humility. Mistakes were corrected gently. Learning was seen as a shared journey. He spent more time with the daughter, speaking little, observing more. Their connection grew slowly, built on respect rather than excitement. They walked together, worked together, and shared silence without discomfort. He realized that strong bonds did not need constant words. They needed presence and sincerity. The day of the gathering arrived under a clear sky. It was not grand or loud. There was no display meant to impress outsiders. Instead, it was meaningful to those who stood there. Elders spoke words of wisdom. Families shared food. Stories were told, not about the future, but about the past that had brought everyone to this moment. The man felt something settle inside him as he stood among them. He was no longer a traveler passing through. He was part of something that would remember him, just as he would remember it. As time moved forward, life did not suddenly become easy. There were challenges, misunderstandings, and moments of doubt, but there was also support. When he struggled, someone guided him. When he succeeded, it was shared, not celebrated alone. He learned that strength did not come from standing apart, but from standing together. Sometimes, he thought about the day in the desert when he had stopped beside an injured stranger. That moment felt distant now, yet its meaning grew stronger with each passing day. He understood that life-changing moments often arrived quietly, disguised as simple choices. Years later, when he would sit under the same wide sky, watching the next generation learn and grow, he would still feel gratitude. Not for the offer that changed his path, but for the courage to act with kindness when no one was watching. His story was never about saving someone. It was about choosing humanity in a place of silence and allowing that choice to reshape everything that followed. And that choice, made once in the heat of the desert, continued to echo through his life, steady and unbroken.